Hey guys, we just had the chance to talk with the National Economic Council Director, that's Kevin Hassett, was out here talking with reporters. We talked to him about the jobs report and about tariffs, and I asked him specifically about those steel and aluminum tariffs. Those are set to take effect on March 12th next week. They have already been signed into law. Those, of course, were a major point of friction with Canada and Mexico in the first term until those two countries got carve-outs. I asked him now if there would be any exemptions for any countries or any industries for those tariffs next week. Here's what he said. Take a listen.
He really doesn't like the word exemption. If I walk in and offer an exemption, then I'll probably get kicked out of the office. We'll see how it goes, though. Maybe there'll be some. I doubt it.
There he said, I doubt it, to the idea of any exemptions to those steel and aluminum tariffs, guys. So I would just flag again, this was a big point of contention with Canada and Mexico and other allies, including the EU, in the first term. It was one of the biggest moves that President Trump did on tariffs with allies in the first term. So I would expect a lot of retaliation next week on this front, especially because the countries that are going to be hit here, it's going to be a 25% tariff on all steel imports and 25% on all aluminum imports. So the folks who got carve-outs last time, it was mostly allies. That's mostly who will be hit this time around. So expect some retaliation, expect ongoing considerations here, and just, re-upping this contention, I would say, with Canada and Mexico right after striking a deal yesterday. Guys.
Megan, he was also asked about the impact of DOGE and federal workforce cuts on the jobs number and whether that's going to roll into the next couple of prints. What do you say about that?
He absolutely was. At first, he said that he thought it wasn't showing up in this report, that it would show up in the next couple of months. So I asked him then, I followed up to say, does that mean you expect some weakness in the following reports? And he showed some optimism. He said, yes, we'll see some DOGE impact on federal hiring. He does think that there will be some manufacturing hiring, especially because of the tariffs, that he says will offset that. We'll have to see if that pans out.
Megan, thank you. Megan Casella, obviously. Let's keep the focus on trade if we can. Joining us now is the White House Senior Counsel for Trade and Manufacturing, Peter Navarro. Peter, good to have you this morning.
Good to be with you, David. Yes, sir.
Actually, I'd like to start with April 2nd because you've talked a lot about it. We had Secretary Lutnick on yesterday. We can talk about a lot of other things, but what are your expectations, given that date is not far away, between now and then, and what will actually happen when it comes to the reciprocal tariffs that you and the rest of the administration have been obviously talking a great deal about?
David, it's a certainty. Let's get rid of that uncertainty that reciprocal tariffs are coming. The notion here is very simple, that the rest of the world cheats us. They can have consistently higher tariffs and higher non-tariff barriers. That was something institutionalized many decades ago in the World Trade Organization with its most favored nation way of approaching tariffs, and we've been paying those bills all along. I would love, just for a minute, though, because of what happened with the jobs report, to put all of this in some broader macro context, if I may. What we are in for the markets is a very healthy transition from Bidenomics, which was based on Keynesian overstimulus at the fiscal level, accommodated by monetary policy at the Fed irresponsibly, coupled with two severe negative supply shocks in the form of higher oil prices and substantially higher regulations. And what that has let us inherit here now is both an inflation that was the worst since the 70s because of the fiscal overstimulus and the supply shocks, and a deflationary impulse in these higher regs and higher oil prices. What we're moving to very rapidly is quite the opposite, a proven Trumpnomics based on fiscal responsibility, monetary responsibility, but most importantly, positive supply shocks. We've already seen the price of oil come down significantly along with gasoline prices, so that's all to the good. The deregulation movement is moving apace, and as you know, David, what we get out of positive supply shocks is that virtuous thing where we get both growth and deflation. So this is the transition that's moving forward. The tariffs and the fair trade play into that by attracting investment, creating jobs here, and driving up real wages. And
right.
I think it's important when you saw the joint address the other night, one of the things that we should shine a bright light on it, Sarah was talking about investment and things like that. The president announced that expensing would be retroactive to January 1. So any restraints on investing over tax uncertainty. So we like where we are right now. Trade policy is an important part of restructuring the global international environment so that we benefit.
But Peter, to that extent that you're restructuring the global environment,
yes.
The uncertainty that comes along with that, the back and forth around certain tariffs being in place and not, and then what's coming on April 2nd, don't you think that does have the effect of freezing business to a certain extent in their capital allocation decisions? And I would even reference Treasury Secretary Besson earlier this morning on Squawk Box talking about a period of detox. Do you agree that is a potential outcome, at least near term?
Well, let's think about what's happened since President Trump took office. He's had, $1 trillion of new investment pledged here by the semiconductor companies, by Apple folks. We saw the last time with steel and aluminum tariffs. With steel, we had $15 billion of new investment. So I reject the idea that there's uncertainty. The uncertainty is created by the fact that people don't take President Trump at his word. Now, with respect to the negotiations that we're having now with Canada and Mexico, the way the media portrays it is, the president put tariffs on and then he takes them off and we're not certain what's happening. If you just simply parse what's going on, David, it's a negotiation and we're winning. I mean, we put the tariffs on, so what happens? The auto companies come to us, and what do they pledge? They say, hey, we are actually going to start moving our supply chains to this country much faster than we should have been doing if we had believed you a couple of months ago. They're getting the picture. And then we've gotten more and more cooperation. There was an extraordinary, I don't praise the New York Times ever, okay? But yesterday was a rare event. They had their podcast daily on where they sent a reporter deep into Mexico to visit fentanyl labs. And the conclusion of that report was, hey, the tariffs are working to break the back of fentanyl production in Mexico. So this is negotiation. And come April 2nd, that's all about reciprocity. Yes, Sarah, how are you?
I'm good. I do think there is some confusion about what the point of the tariffs is, because you've been clear.
Point of which tariffs? Are we talking about the fentanyl drug war tariffs or the ones coming April 2nd?
Drug war tariffs, right? Those are fentanyl. But then we've also heard, talk about tariffs as revenue raisers. We've heard about them as ways to attract investment and manufacturing and jobs into the United States. We've heard about them as ways to level the playing field with our neighbors. We've heard about them as ways to bring tariff barriers and trade barriers down to zero. So I think there's
all of that can be true at the same time. So let me just parse that out for you very clearly. The tariffs that we are imposing now on Canada, Mexico, and China are directly aimed at the fentanyl problem, which is killing, has to date over 1 million people directly and indirectly, and continues to kill Super Bowl audience size numbers of Americans. And that's got to stop. That has got to stop. Now, that's one box. Second box is the reciprocal tariffs. The president has talked about this going back to being on Oprah in the 80s when Japan was cleaning our clocks, about how it's just not fair the way the world treats us. You can't have Germany selling us 8 times as many cars as we sell them because their tariffs are 15 times higher.
So why not instead negotiate a free trade deal with them where they have to bring tariff rates down to zero like us? Like, isn't the way to get no trade barriers and zero tariffs to do a free trade deal, not to match them at higher tariffs? Then we're just copying their bad policy.
No, we're not copying their bad policy at all. The president's policy is, hey, if you want to lower your tariffs and non-tariff barriers, we're there. We're good. You treat us fairly, we're good. That's That's the negotiation right there. We're not going to wait for the World Trade Organization. We're not going to enter into 10-year negotiations with these countries. The president is saying, right here and now, stop this. Stop this. Because it's costing this country jobs and factories and wealth. And you run a trade deficit every year of $1 trillion. Sarah, if I gave you $1 trillion every year,
are you solving for?
How much of America
we have
could you
foreign
buy?
direct investment coming in. We are the best stock market performance in the last year.
Yes.
We're outgrowing
Yes.
everybody. So why mess with? What problem are you solving for if they're all cheating us and ripping us off?
See, this is where you got to get to Akron. You got to get to Youngstown. You got to get to
I'm from
flyover
Cincinnati.
country, Sarah. Well, you go back there and ask folks in Cincinnati what's going on, because when you say that to them, they're just going to shake their head. They're going to say, "Oh, come on, we've heard that for too long." The fact of the matter is, there's too many people in this country who are hurting. I mean, if you just think about what the ravages of NAFTA and China and the WTO and the way trade has devastated our communities, particularly across the Rust Belt, but a lot of other places as well, North Carolina textile. It's just people aren't buying what Wall Street's selling anymore, and that's why President Trump won in a landslide.
I'm glad you mentioned
exactly
states.
Why he won.
I'm glad you mentioned states, Peter, because then you have Rand Paul, who, I'll quote, almost every industry in Kentucky has come to me and said it will hurt our industry and push up prices of homes, cars. He goes, there is such a thing as strategic retreat.
Well, look, Ron Paul doesn't love our trade policy, and that would be a gentle way of saying it. What I'd love to hear every member of Congress acknowledge, and everybody on Wall Street acknowledge, is that the world's cheating us. That's the fundamental reality. That's all we're trying to deal with. I mean, come on.
But
the reality is they cheat us.
What does a level playing field then look like? If we were to make an assumption that we're able to compete globally based on the prowess of U.S. manufacturing, I mean, we still have, obviously, we pay our workers a lot more than they pay in China or any other places in the world. I mean, how competitive will our products truly be? Or are we creating really a domestic manufacturing economy for domestic consumption?
Well, so you have to understand, for example, with China, much of their so-called competitive advantage is artificially done by the government. To me, there's one metric that's really important, and I think it's very important as well to the president. That's the trade deficit. It's $1 trillion now. The way free market economics is supposed to work is countries should not be allowed to run sustainable chronic trade deficits, particularly of such large sizes. So when you ask me what fairness looks like, I would say a world in which we balance our budget, we balance our trade deficit. If we did that, the trade deficit, one of the epiphanies, David, is if you just calculate how the real GDP quarterly number is calculated, it's consumption plus investment plus government spending, which tend to be positive. But at the end, then you have to subtract net exports, which is to say a trade deficit probably shaves 1 to 1.5% of real GDP growth off every year. That's the difference between a 4 and a 2.5.
But a lot of people think that we have the trade deficit.
Happens.
A lot of people think the trade deficit is a reflection of the fact that we have the strongest, best consumers in the world, and we have appetite for foreign goods because, U.S. consumers are in good shape, and psychologically they are wired to spend, and people are jealous. In Europe, they're jealous of that. In China, they have a savings problem where they need to see more consumption. So doesn't a trade deficit just reflect the fact that we import a lot of stuff from everybody because we have great consumers?
So if I told you that you take a $50,000 BMW and a $50,000 Cadillac, and you export the BMW to the United States and they sell it here for the low 40s, and you take that Cadillac and you send it to Germany with its much higher tariffs, VAT, and trade barriers, and they sell it in the mid 60s, Have I not explained to you exactly why it's about unfairness rather than
I get
the
that.
items
I get
you're
that
saying?
too. I get
mean,
that
come
too,
on.
Peter. But at the same
go
time,
every country.
Yeah.
Every
Well, wait,
country.
all right.
I can give you an example
Let's do
of that.
China then. Let's do China then, because they've got a enormous EV industry there. And you could imagine a scenario in which there were no barriers whatsoever. If we allowed them to sell their EVs into our country, BYD, I mean, you could make a $20,000, $25,000 automobile available conceivably to a U.S. consumer. I can't see how that wouldn't take significant market share versus what GM or Ford would be able to do in their market.
Well, let's ask how they do it. Let's start with the sweatshop labor. Then let's go to the pollution havens where they don't have any regulations to speak of. The place is a cesspool. The rivers and their air basins are a cesspool. They probably stole a lot of that technology from Tesla and other countries, which we aren't able to monetize. And then you've got massive government subsidies. They keep our EVs out of their market. And then, of course, if you go back to the lithium batteries and how they do that, they use their debt diplomacy to control lithium supplies. And so they create these national champions to crush us. And they're crushing the world. Their model is to build substantial overcapacity in just about everything: copper, steel, aluminum, cars, dump it on world markets, and then take over the industry with Wall Street saying, well, consumers are better off here because China can sell it cheaper. That doesn't work. It's an unsustainable equilibrium, and that's why President Donald John Trump has been the only president to say that doesn't work and we're doing something about it. So this is where we're at. All we want is fairness. We're not getting that. If we get fairness, and by the way, I mean, for folks watching this, bullish. I'm usually kind of a sector rotation guy. You know, I was a contributor for 10 years on your show. I love being there. I know all of you well, and I love all of you. But for the Trump administration would be the one place where I'd be like, want a passive investor and want to see that market go up. But also, there's got to be, Brother Kramer's got to do like a MAGA portfolio and see ahead. So see the companies that are going to do well when trade is more fair, whether it's Century Aluminum or U.S. Steel or Nucor, or whether it's when we get Apple coming here, whatever. See the chessboard here, but it's bullish. And we're making this transition from Bidenomics, which is inflationary, stagflationary, to a sustainable price stability, real growth, rising real wages like we had. And we proved this for 3 years during the Trump administration.
Peter, even if you agree with all of what you just said, I don't know whether you consider the Journal friend or foe, but this op-ed today.
Foe? Foe. Let's be clear. They called me out again yesterday in one of their lead editorials.
Their argument is it's doubtful the president even has the power.
I'm a nice guy, Paul.
Someone should sue. Someone should sue. What do you make of that?
Look, the Wall Street Journal is the Wall Street Journal, not the Main Street Journal. How many times do I have to say that? And Paul Gigot runs that editorial page like an iron fist. It bothers the reporters on the print side who like they want to be portrayed as fair, and they're just They had two lead editorials in the first term that were titled "The Navarro Recession," based on their trashing of our trade policy, and all we got was price stability and growth. And so that's the difference here. Hear me on this, America. Hear me on this, CNBC.
All right.
All this rhetoric about inflation and the sky's falling, they said the same things in the first term and it didn't happen. That's the difference here. We've got data on our side.
Really quickly, Peter. So let's end where we started. April 2nd, we trade with over 200 countries. I imagine there are millions of tariffs out there. What can we expect? What kind of size of new rules and tariff rates, reciprocal tariffs are we going to get? That seems like a lot of work, and it's really complicated, especially if you guys are counting things like sales taxes and VAT taxes.
Hey, okay, I love that question, Sarah. It's a great question. And this is not going to be like a free trade deal like the USMCA where you have 4,000 different HTS codes with different tariffs. The concept here is one number that reflects in the aggregate the unfairness embedded in the higher tariffs and non-tariff barriers that countries impose on us. And that's the one number that the tariffs will be for each country that will help us erase that unfairness. And you'll see this on two fronts. You'll see it at the industry level. That's Howard Lutnick, Secretary of Commerce, will be leading that with the 232s on things like autos. And then Jameson Greer, Bob Lighthizer,'s old lieutenant, who is just coming into his own, and really I'm just so impressed with the man. He's going to be dealing with the 301 country-specific investigations. And between the two of those, President Donald John Trump is going to level the playing field for American workers and American companies, and it's bullish.
Peter, always appreciate it. The president apparently now speaking at 11. Any idea what he's going to be talking about?
You know, I survived 4 years in the Trump administration because I never got ahead of the president.
Got it.
Not going to do it today. But it's really great to talk
case.
to the three of you, and it's always a pleasure.
All right. Thank you. Peter Navarro.
Take care.
You too.
I mean, it is always a good exercise to go back and forth to really get into the psyche of how they're thinking about tariffs, why they're doing it, what the process looks like, because I think it can be a lot of whiplash for investors and CEOs and trying to understand why.
And still trying to understand the ultimate goal, which I understand you want to improve the livelihood of American workers, and you may well do that, but it's not clear to me that that's going to result in anything except a more expensive world overall, and not necessarily one where we're going to be more competitive globally.
Also, Peter's right. There have been investment announcements, but it's not like we've heard car companies make plans to reshore or bring production back yet. Has not happened on the auto front.
Civic in Indiana, maybe that's a
the Japanese, yes.
The Japanese,
yeah, but instead of Mexico. So that's the kind of stuff they want. But can it happen in a large scale? Can we make T-shirts here? I don't know.
No, we'll never make T-shirts here.
All right, after a break, Goldman Sachs' take on these tariff headlines and this morning's weaker than expected jobs report. Chief economist Jan Hatzius is with us on this Jobs Friday. We're back in a moment.